At 22:17 local time, three U.S. Air Force B-1B Lancers were racing north across the Persian Gulf toward Kar Island. For 2 weeks, the coalition had turned Iran's military into scrap metal and deliberately left this one island untouched. The approach had been routine so far. That would all change in a matter of seconds. Unknown to the crew, an Iranian GPS jammer hidden somewhere on the island had locked onto them. Inside the lead B-1, call sign Packer 61, the weapons officer watched his bomb solutions drift. The predicted impact points have been tracking clean for an hour. Tight clusters, single-digit accuracy. Now they were crawling east across his display. 1 meter, 3, 7. He recycled the alignment. Same drift, 12 meters and widening. On any other target, 12 meters is a rounding error. On Kar Island, 12 meters puts a 500-pound bomb through the wall of a crude oil storage tank instead of the cruise missile bunker next to it. He pulled up the electronic warfare display. GPS jamming, radiating from somewhere on the island's northern shore, strong enough to poison every satellite-guided weapon in the formation. And it was getting stronger with every mile they closed. 9 minutes to the release point. The strike lead didn't hesitate. Push the Black Aces forward. 2 FA-18 Super Hornets from BFA-41 were already flying suppression escorts south of the formation. Find the jammer, destroy it before the bombers get there. The lead pilot rolled in with a GBU-39 small-diameter bomb, 258 pounds, GPS-guided, surgical. The SDB tracked its coordinates faithfully and faithfully missed by 15 meters. The jammer was degrading the very weapon aimed at destroying it. Think about that. The thing protecting itself with the exact problem it was causing, like trying to cancel your wife's credit card while she's the one who handles the bank login. He came around for a second pass, lower this time, descending through 12,000 feet where his targeting pod could paint the building with a laser instead of trusting the poisoned GPS signal. Direct hit. The building folded and the jamming signal dropped by half and kept right on transmitting. The source wasn't in the building, it was underneath it, a hardened basement that the bomb couldn't touch. He needed a penetrator he didn't carry. Here's where things get interesting. If you look here at the island layout, Karg handles 90% of Iran's crude exports. The coalition wanted the military targets destroyed and the oil left standing. You don't win a war and works like someone blasting an air horn next to your phone while you're trying to follow turn-by-turn directions. The satellites are still talking, but your phone can't hear them over the noise. A 15-meter drift cracks the containment firm, and the oil starts burning whether you aimed at it or not. Then the defensive systems officer cut across radio with news that made everything worse. Iran's domestically built surface-to-air missile system. Think of it as a home renovation project where half the parts come from the original American Hawk missile and the other half were whatever Iran could build in the garage under sanctions. Not as capable as the Russian S-300s Israel smashed last year, but the MRASD throws Shalemic missiles at Mach 3. And right now, it knew exactly where 3 B-1s were. The B-1? It's a lot of aircraft. Fast, heavy, and about as stealthy as a bonfire. 3 square meters of radar cross-section at 18,000 feet. 3 Lancers up there have the radar signature of a minivan with the high beams on. 30 seconds later, Morsa is illuminating Hadi fire control radar. They just went from watching to aiming. The EA-18G Growler orbiting 40 miles west caught the Hadi emission in under 1 second. If you look here at the Growler's ALPU-249 jammer pod, it floods the enemy radar frequency with enough power to turn the display into static, like trying to read a license plate while someone power washes your windshield. The Morsa commander's fire control solution collapsed, but he reached for the backup without breaking stride, the Hadi's electro-optical tracker. This is a camera that works on infrared instead of radio waves. You can jam a radar, you cannot jam a camera. It just looks Persian Gulf sky. Clear, unlimited visibility, and 4 General Electric F101 engines at military power glow against cold upper atmosphere like lit cigarettes in a dark parking lot. The Morsa commander didn't need radar anymore. He just needed to look up. Inside Packer 61, the weapons officer checked his bomb trajectories against the Hornet's assigned corridor, a geographic lane 2 miles south of the bomber track. Clear. He checked again. Clear. The Black Aces weren't in their lane. They were 2 miles north, still orbiting over the jammer site for a re-attack inside the bomber's corridor. The weapons officer didn't know they drifted. The Hornet pilots didn't know the bombers were 30 seconds from release. Link 16 updates every 12 seconds. In a strike this compressed, 12 seconds is a lifetime. Cleared hot, releasing. 12 GBU-38s dropped from Packer 61's rotary launchers. Each 500-pound weapon steered toward its own GPS coordinate. Degraded, compensated, close enough. The fall line arced through 15,000 feet where nobody was, and through 12,000 feet where 2 Super Hornets were still trying to finish off a jammer that refused to stop transmitting. The weapons officer saw the updated positions populate on Link 16 3 seconds after release. 2 blue triangles, 12,000 feet directly under the bomb trajectories. Chester Flight, break south, friendlies in the fall line. Break south now. The lead Black Ace didn't process the words. He processed the tone, the raw frequency of the man watching weapons fall toward friendlies, and broke 6 Gs to the south. 12 500-pound JDAMSs arc through the airspace the Hornets had just occupied 4 seconds earlier. The lead pilot would later say he felt the pressure change through the canopy as one passed below. 4 seconds between a routine deconfliction update and a friendly fire incident that would have cost 2 $70 million aircraft and their crews. Both Hornets scattered 10 miles south. No fighters overhead, the suppression element gone. One Iranian engineer in one hardened basement had pulled the entire strike package apart at the seams. The B-1 weapons officer reached for the one tool that could fix 2 problems at once. He programmed 2 aim points, the MRSA launcher and the comms facility 400 meters north that intelligence flagged as the jammer's real location. Fix the SAM and the GPS in the same 5-second window, or don't fix either. He squeezed the release. Packer 61 lurched as it dropped off the central line. The Jason Turipan lit and the weapon dropped toward the wavetops until it was gone. 2,200 pounds of cruise missile now skimming 50 feet above the Gulf on inertial guidance. No GPS, no radar emission, nothing for the island's sensors to hear. It threaded between Iranian coastal surveillance stations at just under the speed of sound, hugging the water the way a submarine hugs a thermocline. 12 kilometers out, the infrared seeker switched on. The Murad commander, staring at the sky through his electro-optical tracker, scanning for bombers at altitude, would never see a missile sneaking in from the south behind his battery at wavetop height. 3 seconds later, the JASM's infrared seeker acquired the missile launcher's thermal bloom. The warhead punched through the housing, and 9 Salam, America sold it to, destroyed by the people who designed the original. Your tax dollars full circle. But 9 missiles worth of solid propellant was now burning downhill toward the containment berm surrounding Crude Storage Cluster 4. The berm was built for tanker spills, slow, heavy crude that pools and waits for cleanup. Burning missile propellant is a different animal. Hotter, faster, and it doesn't wait for anyone. If it overtops the berm, the oil ignites, and every surgical strike on the island becomes irrelevant because the whole place is on fire. The SAM was gone. The GPS was still half jammed. The propellant was creeping toward 30 million barrels of crude, and 132 bombs were about to fall on an island where Samabot guns next to the oil tanks couldn't be touched. Packer 62 rolled in at 22:29, and the bay door split open. The Skyguard fire control radar on the nearest Samabot battery locked on the formation in under 3 seconds. What happened next wasn't in the breathing. The first tracers didn't burst 1,000 feet below where area denial fire belongs. They burst at altitude, bracketing the formation close enough that the concussion punched through the flight controls, and orange lights strobed globed across the windscreen. The gunners weren't lobbing rounds into empty sky anymore. They were firing predicted trajectories, and the Americans were about to learn why. 60 seconds before the JSOM turned the mayor's battery into a hillside bonfire, he keyed his radio. Not a distress call, a targeting handoff. 6 minutes of precise optical tracking data. Altitude, heading, speed, formation spacing, compressed into a single encrusted burst aimed at 2 Samabat anti-aircraft batteries flanking the central tank farm. He'd watched this weapon to every other battery in Iran for 14 days. The jamming comes first, then the silence, then the missile you never see. He wasn't trying to save his battery. He was trying to make sure the gunners on the other end of that radio could finish what he'd started. If you look here at the Samava battery, it mounts twin Oerlikon 35mm barrels that fire 550 rounds per minute. Individually, each round isn't much, about the size of a D battery with an explosive charge. But 550 a minute from 2 barrels creates a wall of shrapnel that shreds anything flying through it. And both batteries sat close enough to the crude oil tanks that a single bomb aimed at the guns risked the oil behind them. You can't suppress what you can't bomb. The pilot held heading. His job during weapons release was to fly a perfectly straight line through anti-aircraft fire. No evasive maneuvering, no altitude changes, because any correction disrupts the computer's calculating 12 separate drop trajectories. If you've ever tried to thread a needle while someone shakes the table, you'd understand the concept. 18 seconds of straight and level through 35mm shrapnel. Tracers bracketed Packer 62 for the full 18-second release window, close enough to rattle the airframe. The weapons officer watched the release sequence tick down, bomb after bomb dropping into the night while 35mm rounds detonated in the air around the aircraft. Near misses all of them. But the Samabit gunners were walking their fire closer with every correction, and the B-1 couldn't turn until the last bomb cleared the bay. 18 seconds of holding course while someone tried to put a round through your cockpit. The longest 18 seconds any of them have ever counted. 24 GBU-38s away. Bay doors closed, the pilot broke hard left and dropped 2,000 feet into the kind of descending turn that pinned you into the ejection seat. Below the formation, a Samabit gunner near the tank farm kept firing. The rounds probably couldn't reach through the Growler's adjusted jamming, probably, but every tracer climbing into the darkness was proof that the Samabit commander's final radio burst was still doing damage minutes after the weapon had stopped existing. Packer 61's degraded GPS bombs hit with 12-meter accuracy instead of 5. First impact on the Western Cruise Missile bunker, 11.4 meters from aim point instead of the planned 2.8. The roof collapsed, secondaries contained, but the margin to the pro-chemical terminal had shrunk from comfortable to the kind of number that keeps weapons officers awake on the flight home. On the sniper pod infrared feed, the propellant fire from the Mers hillside was still creeping toward the berm, holding, not breaching. Every bomb impact shaking the ground it sat on. Then the boats. 2 IRGCN patrol boats cleared the Josh and breakwater at 35 knots, loaded with mines running northeast for the supertanker loading channel. The Hornets that should have been overhead were 60 miles south, scattered there by the fall line emergency 4 minutes ago. If those mines reach the channel, no tanker approaches Karg until a minesweeper clears every meter. Weeks, maybe longer. The entire point of preserving the oil stops mattering if nobody can reach it. But before the boats, there was one more target that couldn't wait: the mine storage bunker on the east shore. If you look here at the layout, this bunker held EM-52 rocket-propelled rising mines and Sadaf contact mines stacked floor to ceiling, 100 to 250 kilograms of explosive per unit. Drop a 500-pound GBU-38 through the roof, and you don't just hit the bunker, you set off everything inside it. Primary blast radius, 35 meters. Secondary from the stored mines north of 300. Nearest oil pipeline junction, 280 meters east. The obvious bomb is the one bomb you absolutely cannot use. The weapons officer went counterintuitive, used the biggest bomb for the most delicate job. Two GBU-31s, the only 2,000-pounders in the formation. If you look here at the warhead, it's a BLU-109 penetrator with delayed fusing at 25 milliseconds. The penetrator punched through the roof, drove the floor level, and detonated, collapsing the structure inward and burying the mine stockpile under hundreds of tons of concrete before a single round could cook off. The 2,000-pound bomb was the gentler option. Pipeline intact, the mine bunker was sealed. The boats were not. The Black Aces were already sprinting north, recalled the moment the pier contacts appeared, pushing their engines to full military power across 60 miles of Gulf. 60 miles at 550 knots is roughly 7 minutes. 7 minutes where two patrol boats ran north with nobody chasing them. They arrived late enough that one GPS jammer in one hardened basement had handed two patrol boats a head start on the most consequential mining operation since the Tanker War. The lead pilot put the Joskin Pier on his targeting pod. 5 of the original 7 boats still sat at the pilings. His GBU-39s walked through the tied-up holes in 4 rapid releases, boats folding at the pilings like aluminum cans. 5 boats in under a minute. Not bad for a pilot who'd nearly been hit by his own side 10 minutes ago. 2 boats made it out. Catching them meant descending to 12,000 feet for reliable infrared tracking on targets that small, which put both Hornets inside the effective envelope of the Sabot batteries. At 18,000, the 35mm rounds barely reached. At 12,000, the Hornets were textbook targets. The lead pilot descended anyway. 12,000 feet. Tracers reaching for him now within 10. Bursts bracketing his flight path as a Skyguard walked corrections toward his computed position. The shells didn't just flash, they concussed. Each airburst thumping through the airframe like someone kicking a fuselage from the outside. He needed the targeting pod locked on the lead boat, which meant steady wings. Which meant no evasive maneuvering, which meant flying a straight line through accurate fire from guns that couldn't be bombed. He switched to GBU-54 laser JDAM. If you look here at the weapon, it's a 500-pound bomb with dual-mode guidance. The laser from his pod paints the boat's hull the way your headlights track a deer on a dark road. Wherever the boat moves, the weapon follows, but only as long as his hand holds steady on the designator. One flinch from a close burst, and the laser walks off the hull and a 500-pound bomb goes stupid into the Gulf. And at 12,000 feet, the flinch opportunities were coming every 3 seconds. A 35mm airburst detonated close enough to rattle the 1635 canopy frame. He held the laser. The boat's captain had turned head-on, narrowing his thermal profile to 4 meters while running at full throttle. Smart. Also meant the pilot had to hold a laser on a 4-meter hole bouncing through his own wake at 35 knots, while tracers bracketed the aircraft from both sides. Impact tore the lead boat apart at full speed. His wingman was already tracking the second craft, which had broken west toward the island shallows. The wingman cut inside the turn at 11,000 feet, tracers arcing past the canopy and put a GBU-54 into the stern. The boat folded backward over its own wake. Packer 63 pushed over the island on the final run, absorbing Packer 62's redistributed targets on top of his own list. The weapons officer had been reprogramming coordinates mid-approach for the past 4 minutes, adding aim points to a delivery sequence that was already full, while tracers stitched the sky around the aircraft. The Sambot gunners had been firing for 20 straight minutes now, barrel heat warping the tracers into wavering arcs that climbed past the aircraft like slow-motion fireworks. The airport control tower, 3 decades of IRGC helicopter coordination from its top floor, collapsed into its own foundation. The military district headquarters took 2 GBU-38s, and the second floor ceased to exist. The barracks complex behind it folded next. Then, the communications relay that had been feeding target updates to the patrol boats. On the sniper pod's final pass, the propellant fire from the hillside had reached the base of the containment berm and stopped. The concrete held. 30 million barrels of crude oil sat exactly where the coalition needed it, intact, undamaged, and completely undefended. 500 meters southeast, the USS Tripoli was making 20 knots into the Gulf, with 2,200 Marines and a squadron of F-35Bs. The reason America's roads have potholes was pulling into the driveway. If you enjoyed this video, watch one of our other videos on the war with Iran. Bye for now.